Hello, and on behalf of the UK Government's UK Trade and Investment and Spring Fair International, thank you for joining us and listening to this very special panel discussion where we're going to be talking about what makes British products great and what makes them so appealing to an international audience. My name is Ian McGarrigle. I'm chairman of the World Retail Congress, and it's my great pleasure to lead the discussion today with our panel of experts and to really look at, as I say, what makes British products great. And the panel that has been brought together on behalf of UK Trade and Investment and the Spring Fair it truly is a panel of experts drawn from the British retail industry. We have two representatives from two true icons of British retailing, Harrods and Selfridges. We have a design expert, a brand representative from Portmeirion, and a representative from a huge part of British retailing. And to start us off, what I'd like to do is to ask each of our panellists to very briefly introduce themselves and just say a very little bit about their businesses and their point of view. So, Alan, if I could turn to you.
Right, well, I'm Alan Hawkins and I'm the CEO of the British Independent Retailers Association, a bit long, BIRA for short, and we look after about 7,000 independent retailers in the country. A variety of interests, but in the purpose of today's discussion, probably more our cookshop and housewares division, where we're strongly represented, and it's an important sector of what we do.
I'm Jude Morgan from Selfridges. I am the Senior Creative Concept Manager for Product Development. We have 4 stores, 1 in London, 2 in Manchester, 1 in Birmingham, and a great online business.
Good afternoon, I'm Dick Steele. I'm Chairman at Portmeirion Group, which is based in Stoke-on-Trent, but trades worldwide. Indeed, 75% of all of our sales go abroad. We own Portmeirion brand, also Spode and Royal Worcester, and our brand history goes back about 250 years.
I'm Annalise. Good afternoon. I'm the Director of Home at Harrods, so overseeing all of the strategy, product, retail, essence of our home business, so covering 2 floors of our iconic store and about 135,000 square feet of retail space.
And I'm Alice Rawsthorn. I'm the design critic of the International New York Times. So I write about every area of design in every country, not just Britain, for a global readership, for the International New York Times and the New York Times newspapers, and also for our website, which is the world's most read news website.
Thank you very much all, and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. And to start us off, I'd really like to sort of get your views on what you think is so unique about British product, particularly in this home and gift area that we're talking about, because it's interesting the work we've been doing in conjunction with the UKTI. We have been talking to international buyers, and they often use the words heritage and eclectic and unique in terms of describing British products, how they see them. So really interested to start us off, get your individual thoughts, and Alice, perhaps with your international view looking in at British products and British design. I'm just really interested what you particularly think.
Well, we have such an incredible heritage, both of design and manufacturing in Britain, that it's very difficult to generalise. But if I had to sum up, to sort of crystallise what makes British design, particularly in this sector, so special, I would say it is the sort of idiosyncratically British mix of the respect for tradition and for history, a real zest for modernity and the new, an ability to continually reinvent and innovate, but sort of twisted together with our typically British sense of humour. And I think that's a very powerful and very appealing combination that has stood British products in great stead from the Industrial Revolution onwards.
It really is one of those, I suppose, brands, British brands in an essence that speaks to all of those values. So uniqueness, you mentioned, heritage, provenance, and all the modernity that comes with it. If I try and position that within the luxury market and really speaking to a luxury consumer, what we're seeing in terms of an evolution of that consumer is, whereas maybe a decade ago, that consumer was a little bit more ostentatious, very much buying into brands and logo and being very obvious about their luxury purchases. What we're starting to see at Harrods, and I'm sure across the luxury sector, is much more of a development to a slightly more considered luxury purchase. And actually what that means is that the consumer is looking for craftsmanship, the understanding of the provenance behind the brand, the heritage that brings all of that together, as well as what can often be a quirky or tongue-in-cheek design, or certainly innovation. And those things together, and actually then presenting that to the consumer so they understand what that means, to me is really sums up how Britain can, or British brands can play a super important part in that whole new world.
Can I just follow up on that point about heritage? It really is very important. But I'm going to come to heritage, but first of all, I think British also means safety, reliability and quality and trust, and all of those things are really important. And I'm really delighted to be sandwiched between Selfridges and Harrods, which is a really good place to be, and next to Byra as well. In terms of heritage, I'm drinking here out of a cup design which is nearly 200 years old, out of a pattern which is nearly 200 years old. This is Spode Blue Italian, first designed by Josiah Spode the Younger in 1816. That's fantastic. But what does British mean? If you look inside that pattern is Amari, which is based on the Japanese port from which they exported most porcelain in the 16th and 17th century. And the picture in the middle is based on a Frederick de Moucheron print from the 17th century, and he was a Dutch Grand Master. So British also means cosmopolitan, in my view.
I think that example is great for the different generations as well. So whereas I'd be completely happy to drink out of that, and you'd expect to see that in maybe a 20-something or a 30-something kitchen or household, you could also expect to see that across any of the generations. And I think in terms of trends and development, that's something that the Brits do really well. So both British consumers and also British products and designers.
I think consumers get sport for choice, because that's a lovely cup, but I'm sure you do more modern designs as well, because you have to do everything for everybody. The consumer expects to have just what he wanted, if he wants pure heritage, if he wants latest design. And from an independence point of view, we like design, British design in particular, in terms of bringing new opportunities for retailers, because times are hard at the moment, and to get, if you're not fully top end, and you've got to get people to spend their money when it's hardly earned, they need to see something aspirational that they're not used to seeing, and they I must have that. And it's creating demand when they've got plenty of cups where they can drink in their house, and why do I need another one? Well, it's that British design that tempts them to.
And the trust element, just like Dick spoke about, actually, if you're going to invest your hard-earned money, you want to do it in something that you trust the quality, you trust the efficiency, you trust that it's going to, absolutely, that it's going to bring not just something desirable so it's a pleasure to purchase, but also is going to serve you very well as well in the long run.
Indeed. And if you break this saucer, you can replace it in 200 years' time again.
So if British products are, the heritage side and kind of that quirky uniqueness on, say, the other, I mean, the words you've described about reliability and safety and quality, does that also describe the middle, if I can call it that, of other British products? Are there some qualities that you think British products are known for? It doesn't have to be just...
Yeah, I think when I was asking various people, I knew I was coming on today, I thought, what does British design mean? And the word quirky came out, but you can't say every British design is quirky. I mean, there is an aspect of that, and that, but the style as well. You can't imagine we're just doing quirky, very small industry stuff. It can be both, and there's some really superb design.
I think there's a lot of strength and conviction from British designers in their aesthetic, style, look and material. So a materials base or a pattern base or something like that that's very recognisable as something that British designers do very well. Be it Tom Dixon, Donna Wilson, someone like that. You can look at, certainly within the industry, you can look at a cushion and say that's Donna Wilson, even if it is one of her spectrum of designs. You can look at a piece of furniture, a lamp, a vase, even Tom's new accessories range, and completely recognisable. That cake stand has to be Tom Dixon. I think that's something that British designers do very well as well. And even that is British in the same way that you can look at Scandinavian design as well and often say that looks like a piece of Scandinavian design. I think British.
So you could say there's a British look.
I think there is, but it's in itself, not to overuse the word, it can be quite eclectic, and it is very eclectic. So British materials and style and form and function, the whole thing is very, very varied, and almost it is that variance, eclecticness, however you want to put it, that almost makes it British. It's the same as our fashion industry, I think, and then same as London style, in that when people talk globally about London style, often people say you come to London, you see real extremes and a lot of expressionism in people, and I think people's homes are becoming that too.
And how that's pulled together, right, in terms of taking all of those elements.
High, low, mixing things together, the same way people do their wardrobes now.
Absolutely.
And I also think you can look more broadly, because all the adjectives we've been banding around and saying that these are leitmotifs of British products, you could also apply to the Mini, which admittedly is a German-engineered sort of reinvention of a great British design icon. You can look at British architecture, you can obviously look at fashion, look at the influence of Savile Row on designers like Stella McCartney, Paul Smith, Phoebe Philo, Celine. And so in architecture too, it's this mix of the old and the new. I think what's interesting is that many of the adjectives we're using, like safe, trust and heritage, were almost seemed as a bit dry and dusty maybe 5 or 10 years ago, whereas now I think culturally we're in a very different place as consumers, and they are things that people feel really happy to celebrate. They're absolutely seen as virtues rather than sort of stale leftovers from a different period, and I think that is very exciting.
Absolutely, and we're starting to see that come through really very clearly through collaborations that are happening in the marketplace. And actually interesting, we talk about what is British brands, British manufacture or British design, and all of those things can be of course British, but what we're starting to, I think, see is international brands potentially or actually collaborating with British design. Now that to me is equally as exciting, because then it really speaks to some of the other international qualities that are definitely out there, but bringing it back to the eclectic or quirky or whatever, we've used a lot of words, but the nature of actually what is the footprint of British design. Very much so.
Just thinking about design, British design, I mean, I wonder what sort of the relative health of British design is. I mean, Alice, you've been following it for a few years now, and you look at it, look internationally too. I just wonder, what's the reputation of British design per se, and has it gone through an evolution, and where how would you describe it?
Well, whenever I go to a different country, one that we would tend to associate with a strong design culture, like say the Netherlands, which has an incredible reputation for design, particularly for product and furniture design at the moment, they're always moaning and groaning and grumbling and talking about the crisis of Dutch design and what do I think they should do to address it. And I think that in Britain we have much the same tendency, and I think actually that's a sort of healthy criticality. You don't thrive and flourish unless you're constantly questioning and challenging yourself. I actually think this is a really great time for British design, in that really since the 80s, British designers individually have always been cited as among the most gifted internationally, and that's true for product and furniture and home design as it is for fashion design, automotive design and architecture. And we've continued to produce these really inspiring, very ingenious figures who've been genuine innovators in the field, and this has meant that not only have Britain's exports benefited from it generally, but international students have come to British design schools to study, so it's been hugely beneficial all round. Our design culture is still very dynamic, very vigorous and very healthy. Whether our design schools of the future are going to sustain this, unfortunately, there's currently a big question mark on, given the cuts that they've had to bear. But right now, I think if you looked economically at the real benefits for Britain, design would be among the top. I think it's a huge natural strength for us.
Alice, I completely agree, and actually, and I'm sure Jude will agree, it's the retailer's responsibility as part of that to ensure it continues to live, to engage with that actually, because the reality is design in the big world needs to be commercial, and we need to be able to sell product on the back of it allow it to live for a long time. At Harrods, and I know there are lots of different campaigns going on with the different stores, but at Harrods we're about to launch in August this year a campaign around British bespoke, and that's twofold. That's the craftsmanship element of what we actually haven't mentioned, but in my world is super important, which is being able to bespoke products specifically to a customer's needs. And interestingly, many of our international brands can't do that because of quantities, minimum quantities, actually just lead times, whereas actually in Britain, and the manufacturer in Britain can allow that to happen, not just fabulously and with a lot of provenance behind it, but actually swiftly with minimum quantities. So bespoke element is super important, and the British then brings that that to life. And hopefully, ideally, the plan is that we work with some of those very new up-and-coming designers, work with the colleges to bring brands, whether they be British or international, but the British design element together, and hopefully give them a window to start to evolve a successful career.
I think you mentioned the word commerciality. I think it does have to sell at the end of the day. And I think British design actually brings a sort of practicality to it as well, which doesn't mean it's downgraded the design element of it. But I mean, I think in London, I've got two sons who live in very small flats, and the way they've used design to actually make things work in a small space, mixing bowls that go inside each other, and scales you can fold back into one little strip and then the drawer. If you haven't got the space, and the design is actually meeting a need. So there's a practical element to the design, I think, and that's. And colour is a whole area too. Really. They're redesigning the seasons from a retail point of view. They're recreating the demand, even when people have got the product, because they, colouring, say, well, it's the wrong colour for this season. Great from a retail perspective, because you've got to sell it again, haven't you? And I think one of the manufacturers last year, one of the awards ceremony we did was doing toasters with different coloured panels in it, so you could change the panels to suit the season, which actually may not be a good thing, because we'd rather sell the toaster again, but actually it's probably a practical thing to say, this is design and fun, and we're aware that you want to change colours. And
I think consumers want to make quite rapid changes in their homes as well these days. Yeah. People are a lot more fashionable and keen to make changes often.
I think so often retailers tend to, in my world, the independent, price shouldn't dominate, because people actually, they're buying things too cheaply. They don't actually want them as cheap as they see them sometimes. They want to have a product they aspire to. And I think British-led products give you the confidence that this has actually got something behind it. It's not just here and today, gone tomorrow. There's a design behind it. The product's good. It's safe. I can use it. And I think that's where British design, not always British manufactured, we've got to be honest about this. The design is probably British-led. Sometimes it's manufactured as well, but sometimes we have to go abroad for the manufacturing angle. But I think the actual design side, we've got so many good schools in this design colleges in the country. It's fantastic.
And the students that I speak to and that I have worked with in the last few years are also really embracing new technologies, which I think is really exciting. There's no fear. I mean, I suppose there never has been from students, but there's no fear on 3D printing or how they're producing things, and also where there is lack of possibility to make something in an existing industry. They're all really exciting to go and invent the thing that makes their design as well, which I think is a really great shift. And I don't know if that's just the UK that do that so much, but I've met a lot of British students who've had to make the production technique for the product that they wanted to make because it wasn't there for them, and it's almost become part of that journey.
Yeah, it makes them more resourceful and ingenious. I also think that a huge economic boon for British design at the moment is the sort of resurgence of entrepreneurialism. And obviously a lot of that has to do with the internet. So access to alternative sources of funding, they can market their own goods, they can identify potential collaborators more easily using the web, and they have access to digital production technology. And I think that has really helped British design, particularly in this sector, because if we were all sitting here talking about our marvellous heritage, that's absolutely fine, and it's wonderful, and it's a great asset for any nation and any industry to have. But I think what's so special about British design is it's constantly reinventing and redefining that heritage, and undoubtedly digital technology and entrepreneurialism are making that process much easier now, and I think that's very exciting.
It really is free market enterprise, and you almost go back to Darwin and him talking about survival of the fittest, by which he didn't mean the strongest, he meant the thing that was the most fit for the environment. And it's the same with design. If you design enough things, you will find the right thing that the customer wants. Can I follow up on a word you used, Alan, fun? Do you think that's important? I mean, when I walk past your windows at Selfridges at Christmas, I enjoy the fun of it. Is fun a big part of design? Is it important?
I think fun is part of life. If you're in retail, you've got to make the thing fun for the customer. Or the customers are going to come in having a boring experience. And I think if you go into a shop and they've got the same things as they had last year, you just think, oh, I'm never going to go into that shop again. You want new things. So it's a challenge, really. The designers have challenged the retailers. The retailers have then got to challenge the customers. And those three have got to work together to create a commercial output that gives good margins and whatever. I mean, from an independence point of view, we love new design because that gives you a differentiator. We don't want clone town Britain where everything is the same. If you can go, I mean, the springboard for some new designs is independence. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes they'll choose a different route to market. But it enables you to be different. And you can say, well, it's worth going to that town rather than that town because I expect to see something different when I get there. You don't want to be like a Martian. You dropped here and say every town is the same. So I think fun is absolutely critical. And each part of the supply chain has got to make sure they bring a bit of fun into it, because if we all just do the same boring things and play safe, then, and that's where the spring fair comes in, I think, really, is actually, I take my wife sometimes, very dangerous, because she sees things, but luckily she can't buy them when she gets there. But she says, you see all this product at the spring fair, but you can't buy it when you actually get out in the high streets, because the retailers are being too safe. So I think the designers are doing their work, and perhaps the retailers need to say, well, we need to pick up some of this design and run with it. And I think a lot of my training is accountancy. If actually you looked at any shop and said, what 10% isn't working, and I'm going to get rid of that this year, and put some new product in. And if you're going to put new product in, if you're British and you can put British design stuff in there, why not do that? Because that gives you a chance. You may not work, but you've got to take some gambles in life and bring that word back, fun and excitement. And I'm sure you've got plenty of exciting products.
No, I'm all for the fun of it. I actually believe that brand management is a really important thing, and I try to regard it in the same way as you regard a marriage or a relationship. You are what you are, and you stay what you were, but you've got to add a little bit to it all the time, and just make you a fun person to be with in many, many ways. So yeah, I'm all for fun.
And customer engagement. Yes. Is absolutely key, and actually what's very interesting, and it's fabulous to hear actually, is I believe that's responsibility of both the retailer and the brand or the product, and when it works super successfully is when those two things come together and you're both working towards the same goal. It's not enough anymore just to put a product on a shelf. Absolutely doesn't work. You know, it's all about that customer journey. Some of it's around the story, some of it's about bringing to life the craftsmanship, and actually sometimes it's about really shouting about a new innovation that's out there on the market, but it is how you bring that to life that's actually everybody's responsibility. And interestingly, hopefully we'll see some of that at the spring fair.
Sort of following up on that, Annalise and Jude, you both represent amazing stores with, as I said earlier, great British heritage. So I just wonder, how conscious are you in approaching buying that you are an emporium for British products? Is that how you, to a degree, I mean, how important is that? Is that true? And how do you approach that? Because as a retailer in today's world, you also have to have newness and something that attracts international customers as well as.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely believe that it's our responsibility to bring some of that, to life, definitely. But the ultimate goal is to bring uniqueness into the environment. So point of difference, unique product. At Harrods, exclusivity is tremendously important. We have probably one of the most eclectic international bases. But what's interesting and why British is becoming even more relevant is a lot of those markets, and particularly the larger growing ones for us, certainly in London, definitely at Harrods, are like the Chinese market as an example, are absolutely seeking, and it speaks to exactly what you spoke about, Dick, seeking definitely provenance, but quality, trusted product, and that very much is all wrapped up in British. They they love the historical element alongside, juxtapositioned again alongside the innovative. So interestingly, we talk about Britain being absolutely, or British brands being on trend, and that's one of the main reasons for. So very important, but it's still got to stand out. So the fact that it's British as itself is a great asset, but it needs to be led with new concepts, exclusivity and point of difference, yeah.
Absolutely, I mean, very similar answer really. The international market do love to see the more heritage lines, the British ones, the ones with provenance. But we're an international store with international brands and international customers, and we have a policy of everybody's welcome, and we sort of often talk internally about high, low, fast and slow, which means that we're looking for the brands, we're looking for the products, we're looking for the exclusives, and I think we'd always like to keep that international mix to make sure that there is truly kind of something for everyone. In terms of our own label product development, we really like to work with British producers and British makers where possible, and we have plans in the future to develop that more, as in if we were going to develop ceramics, they would absolutely be developed inside of the UK, and it makes sense to work on the heritage and the provenance.
You need to come and have a look at our factory.
Yes, absolutely, we will. And one word that I use quite a lot of work is authenticity, as in if it feels right for it to be British, then it should be. And sometimes, if I'm talking about coffee, then it's more relevant that it is an Italian espresso mug than a British one. So really the product and the customer lead.
But if it was tea?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. But just as similar question to Alice about design and the health of the design industry, it's interesting you talk about sourcing from British product. I mean, it's debated a lot now about trying to rebuild British manufacturing and producers. I mean, what state of health do you see British companies in that way? I mean, obviously Portmeirion and Rawsthorn are 200 plus years old, but what's...
We brought quite a lot of production back to the UK since 2009. We still produce quite a lot abroad. Our own factory is full up, producing finest English earthenware. When it comes to bone china or porcelain, we have that made abroad for us, but it's to our specification and it is our design and our product. So we do as much as we can, and Stoke itself is thriving. Stoke as a town is producing 1 million pieces of pottery a week. We're doing 155,000 a week.
It's
so
kind
we're
of
quite busy.
Built into the PR story as well, isn't it? And I think there's been a real resurgence I've noticed in young designer makers going back. Like there's a young girl that we were working with last year in London, in East London, who actually moved to Stoke so she could do all of her production there. And cities like Nottingham, I think, are becoming really important again. You know, I think Mary Portas and her knickers, which is not a home product, but sort of reviving those factories in the UK. That's what the PR teams talk about, and that's what they enjoy. So I think it's a really positive thing.
Alice, do you see that as well? Do you have a sense that British manufacturing, British production is improving and growing again?
Well, I think to go back to the Darwin analogy, it is the survival of the fittest. And what seems to have happened is that obviously the sort of the mushy middle, if you like, of British manufacturing hasn't survived, but any company that really does have a claim on quality, on a point of difference. I mean, one of the really interesting things at looking at the exhibitors at the Spring Fair is there are so many companies with incredible provenance. I mean, you look at a company like Ulster Weavers, where when you look at any of their tea towels, the simplest of products, whether it's one of the very traditional designs. I mean, this is a company that's been weaving Irish linen for over 200 centuries, and you can tell it when you look at the tea towels. There is that authenticity, lovely word that you use, that just sort of screams out at you. And I think that their example in continuing and sustaining has inspired other companies to sort of start manufacturing anew and afresh. There are lots of young designer makers who, perhaps because there wasn't a manufacturing infrastructure for them to draw on, have had to work on their own. And also because I think we do now prize those traditional techniques and processes. I mean, it's wonderful to read about young potters going to Stoke-on-Trent. There's also wonderful precedent for it. After, when the Bauhaus design school, the famous modernist design school in Germany, sort of dissolved as Nazi persecution drove many of the students and teachers from Germany. Many of the students and teachers came to Britain, and several of the ceramicists went to live in Stoke-on-Trent because they believed that they should design near the source of production. So they worked for Minton, I think one woman worked for Spode, and did really wonderful designs for them. So it's nice to think that designer makers now are sort of following that historic precedent.
I mean, and absolutely, and on the back of that, we should still encourage all of, the investment through those manufacturing, because the reality is we're definitely improving. I would love to see it much more so. There are still key elements that we work with. Sheffield, obviously, for silver, Cashmere in Scotland, Hoyk, Johnston's, amazing. But I would still love to see, a lot of the designers still have to go elsewhere for commercial reasons, The P&L has to work for your business. So it's definitely improving, but I would love to see more coming our way.
But a lot of the modern design doesn't need massive production runs. If you're looking for exclusivity, you don't need to go overseas necessarily, because you're looking to try an idea. Right? It's a scale thing really. So I think that's where the British design and manufacturer can work really. And if it is mass produced, then it loses a bit of that exclusivity as well. So I think.
Well, and where digital manufacturing technologies like 3D printing are going to have a massive impact, because in principle that means that products of all sorts of different price points, including the very cheap ones that migrated to low-cost production elsewhere, could come back to this country, though of course the designer and manufacturer's role will change fundamentally too.
And things being printed live in store and overnight. We've got a promotion at the moment called Festival of Imagination, and we have 3D printers live in store where you have the potential to print a pair of shoes overnight, and that kind of thing. You know, I don't know, will it survive, will it not? Are the shoes aesthetically pleasing? Maybe, maybe not, but it's definitely the beginnings of something that could really change things. And over Christmas time we had, you could print a mini-me in store, so you could have yourself printed and made, and then they were still hand painted, so it was kind of like an instant production thing. But I mean, that kind of stuff, yeah, it has the wit, it has the eclecticism, it has that kind of British twist to it. Not a British producer in that instance, but definitely something that has to change the future and the future of production.
And how have customers been responding to that? Are they enthusiastic to try it out, or a bit suspicious?
I think there's a little bit timid when you first come over. Not entirely. You don't yet look at a wall of 3D printers, and every single customer isn't sure that that's something that they can buy, or whether it's a spectacle that they're looking at. And the reality is that those are machines that are for sale. They're domestic machines for at home, and you know, actually the reality is what you can print at home maybe is fairly limited. But at the moment, customers, it takes a little bit of explaining. Yes, you can take it home. This is the price point, etc., and this is what it is capable of. But that's a different thing as well, isn't it? Where the customers become the designers themselves. They become the designer maker. What does that do to the industry? How will that change things? Are you actually going to start buying patterns of design? So rather than come and buy a table in your store, do I come in and upload the design of that table and print it myself? You know, there's all those kinds of...
They love the fun of it though, don't they? I mean, that's the whole, that customer engagement, regardless of whether taking it home, is what brings it to life.
But think about these cutting edge sort of technologies and design, but coming back to Dick and the Portmeirion group, you know, the word heritage comes to mind, but you're still with us 200 plus years on, and yes, that design may not have changed, but I know that's not true across the whole range. I mean, how important is remaining relevant, staying relevant? And
absolutely vital.
How do you approach that?
Absolutely vital. Even with a product such as Blue Italian, or our flagship product, which is Botanic Garden, a Portmeirion brand, we are constantly putting new items into it to keep the brand fresh. And Botanic Garden, as a case in point, South Korea is our third biggest market. It's a huge export market for us, about £12 million a year. They cannot get enough Botanic Garden, and they were making pots while we were still painting ourselves blue. That their ceramic history is beyond ours, way beyond ours. But they love it. But staying contemporary and staying new. If I turn to my bag of tricks down here, here's one I made earlier. This is Sophie Conran for Portmeirion, and that looks handmade. It isn't handmade.
It looks it though, doesn't
it? It does look it.
Yes.
That's a 10.5 inch dinner plate, or what we'd call a dinner plate. Retails at about £14. That is contemporary. That is white. It is what she wants to buy now, but some of them still want that as well.
Or both.
Yes, or indeed both. Yes. So you've got to be contemporary, and this helped to revolutionise Portmeirion's business, because all of a sudden we could say to the department stores, yes, we do pretty, but we also do contemporary cutting edge here, and I'm really pleased with this. But this is a £7 million a year product to us.
And that's what would keep it relevant.
Yeah. I think every white is the colour at the moment, and although this is good as well. But I mean, when I'm buying wedding presents for younger friends or whatever, they always want white. But how do you variation white? So you have to put design into it, don't you?
By making
I can see that looks slightly, definitely off trend, off from shape. So that looks handmade. So that's special.
And yet, you know, there are things you can't improve upon. Sorry, I'm turning this into a product thing. No. If you hold that cup is an 1820 design. The shape, Josiah Spode the Younger again, London shape cup. I don't think you can improve upon that as a cup for holding. I think it holds fantastically. Yeah. And so there are things you can't improve upon, and there are things you can improve upon. Yeah.
No. And that's, I think you mentioned earlier, collaboration. I think that's where it gets really exciting, and that's how British brands can stay really current. So you have the heritage to pull upon and draw upon and keep hold of and have as a constant, and then you have the more seasonable, fashionable trends and sort of opportunity up here for collaboration, and be it British and British, or fashion with home, or home with home. I think collaboration is something in the market that's really important now. It's becoming more and more current. But you know, take that cup, invite Peter Pilotto to design a pattern or collaboration on it, and do a limited edition run so you know, essentially the same ergonomic design with that handle that works so well, but with a great new fashion design collaboration, or you know, Faye Toogood, let her get her hands on it and see what she does to it. You know, those kind of collaborations, I think, are what keeps consumers really interested, what keeps a brand like that at sort of the forefront of fashion, as well as drawing on its heritage. And that's I think, the brands that really survive. You know, there's the new exciting ones, which are new and exciting, and then there's the ones that have made it through that entire history for very good reason, because you have the core to build upon, and then the development and the newness as well.
Indeed.
And again, you're a hugely international business. I just wondered, what, for international buyers that are watching this this film, what lessons have you sort of learnt over the years in terms of working with international customers, and how do you have to adapt?
Be in your market and know your market. In the States, in North America, well, in Canada and the USA, we have a big showroom in Manhattan. We have a big warehouse in Connecticut. Our chief executive is actually based in the USA, and that is our biggest market. We're very Christmas orientated over there. We have 7 different Christmas patterns, which is something we in the UK don't really understand. But in the States, at Thanksgiving, you clear your tableware, you put your Christmas pattern out, it stays there till New Year, then you revert to your normal tableware. We have a pattern called Spode Christmas Tree, which we introduced in 1938, and it's a $10 million a year pattern to us. If I go back to South Korea, it's Botanic Garden because it's highly decorated and it looks very expensive because of that. Whereas in the South Korean market, they would not necessarily buy Sophie Conran for Portmeirion because it's white and it's plain and it looks peasant wear. But to us, it's contemporary. And of course, also in South Korea, they're going to eat a lot out of bowls. So you're going to have quite a range of bowls in your range, far more so than you would for the UK market. So it's know your customer. And I go back to this idea of marriage and the brand. It's knowing the other side to the relationship and trying to make the other side to the relationship quite excited about being in the relationship.
Yes, yeah. I guess for Harrods, Selfridges and your members, I mean, you know how to adapt to international customers, so I guess any international buyer coming into the UK should certainly visit your stores to see because you're obviously responding to your international customers as much as...
Absolutely, and we often say, you know, we often work with brands, newer brands, sometimes in a major way. So Tom Dixon is about to join us, and you know, literally a flagship boutique within Harrods, and that's great for him in the UK market, although he has already got a great reputation and an amazing customer base. But actually what that gives Tom Dixon the opportunity is really to reach out even further internationally, and so we are a platform to a global market, which can work particularly well. And interestingly, we do work with our brands, Spode being one of them, on what is working in different markets to bring it to Harrods, because our international customers are spending with us. Squint is another, really very, greatly well known in the UK, and we're bringing them in a very small way, but predominantly, in fact, will be great, nice business for us, but actually for that brand in particular, that's very much about reaching out globally and almost assisting them in developing a global market, because as long as it's done in a controlled way and everything still remains quite unique and special, which it can on that level, we're just helping, I suppose, manufacturing British brands generally.
We as a brand benefit hugely from being in Harrods or being in Selfridges or in the UK High Street, because visitors from overseas come on. We get a lot of overseas visitors and they see it in store and they say, that's valuable because they stock it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, they've made that edit and that selection for you. And I think the online market gets really interesting for that as well, because obviously the online platform is international as well, and the customer will come to Selfridges or Harrods online because they know that brand, and then they trust our selection, our edit, exactly to represent those brands. And then you do become a platform, and the distribution from online is international, and then it's knowing what to highlight and when, and which customers are interested in what and why. So I think that we keep coming back to that cup.
But, shall I put it away?
No,
is it
not at all.
It's very photogenic.
What I think is that the same customer is interested in the same, a different customer, is interested in the same product for multiple different reasons, and it's how you present that, where you present that, how you talk about it, socially, digitally, visibly in store, VM, all of those things that package that. You could show that to 10 different customers in 10 different styles more than. And that is very important.
I mean, it's difficult for the independent to take an international view on the market. I mean, but what I would prefer is the manufacturers see the world as their marketplace, so they look for their volume, abroad, and then they can keep the UK unique and not prostitute, or what the word is for the UK market. So we like that individuality and specials that independents bring there is better if it is kept that way. I don't mind you two being competitors, because your brand as well. You only got one shop each, or two, not too many shops each, have you? But not that many, you know what I mean? So you're unique shops in your own, or brands in your own name, aren't you, really, as well? So the uniqueness of independence and some iconic British names as well is great for keeping the brands safe and strong, rather than going for the volume.
But interesting, what if you go back into English history, or British history, let's say British history, not English history, what made us strong as a nation was the merchant culture. And the merchant culture was enabled because we had such a strong home consumption market. You bring it from overseas to here, sell it here into a big market, and you've got stuff to export elsewhere. So I believe a strong home market is a really important part of our offering. It's a strong independent. It is our second biggest market as a business.
Well, incredibly, we've almost run out of time, so I just wanted to help draw together the strands. We've covered a large amount of ground and lots of ideas, but to draw it to a conclusion and summarise, I just wonder.
You were there,
It's a nice conversation. So, but as I say, to conclude and summarise, I wonder if each of you could just sort of maybe go over some of the points. But why do you think international retailers and buyers should take a fresh look at British products as a way of drawing together this discussion? So, Alice, if I could start with you.
Well, the short answer to the question is because there are so many phenomenal products to see. I mean, as we've discussed, there's been a real renaissance of entrepreneurialism among young British designers and young British manufacturers. So the fact that Britain has this incredible combination of such a strong heritage, that where really intelligent companies have invested in rejuvenating themselves and reinventing their brands and their design heritages over the years, but also this continuing explosion of new talent, bringing fresh ideas, new outlooks, new dynamism. That's an extraordinary combination, and that's why foreign buyers should come to this country.
And for me, it's very much around a trend around a considered purchase. So whether that be quality, sometimes luxury, definitely innovation and heritage, which is a word that we've used an awful lot because of all the trust element that comes alongside that. So for me, it's a considered purchase, considered luxury quite often, and it really speaks to the trend that globally the market is seeing at the moment.
Because we at Portmeirion and Spode and Royal Worcester have over 500 people employed, most in Stoke-on-Trent, making the finest English earthenware in the world.
I think the international buyers that come to the UK and to Spring Fair and the other shows will find a surprising, eclectic, exciting mix of product that probably will be different than what they were expecting, really, be it materials, details, finishes. I think it'll be exciting and surprising. I mean, I find it that anyway, and I'm based in the UK, so I think it'll be really exciting for international guys.
And I think they ought to come because it keeps the show large, and if the show's large, then the designers and the manufacturers want to be there, and it gives the home market a chance to go and look at all the products in one showcase for a few days, and then decide what they're going to challenge themselves with. To come back to that word, excitement, they've got to go around 100 different stores over a 3-day period and decide what they're going to put in new into their shops next year to excite the market. And we are coming out of a recession, but we've got to tempt people out of that recession. And I think it's good times at the moment, and British manufacturers as well placed as anybody to take some advantage of that.
Thank you. And as I say, that brings us to an end of this discussion. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I think it really goes to prove that we're at a really exciting stage with British products, many of whom, as we've heard from Portmeirion, have been around for hundreds of years, but are constantly reinventing themselves and staying relevant to the international consumer. So on behalf of UK Trade and Investment and Spring Fair International, it just leaves me to thank our panellists for their contributions. So thank you to Alice, Annalise, Dick, Jude and Alan. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you in the UK very soon. Thank you.